All right, we are back as we are in Viridian Forest, and we were with bug catcher Rick, our first trainer that we had to battle all together. As we finally get to overcome it, of getting further and getting through the Viridian Forest, and we end up going through with him, and ideally this ends up happening. We end up running into, when we go more further deep, run into another ranger. As I should say, scout of the bug catchers, and of course, ideally, Rick introduces and says these are some of the other trainers that have been here. This is Stefan, Lufa, Spot, and Splenda. They have been in the forest. You probably have noticed the occurring of the movement route to the bug Pokemon. Now, ideally, slowly, they are venturing through the forest. And of course, as I ideally told them, they have to get through past you to get any further. So ideally, what ends up happening is also, I get in this battle. Now, ideally, if you want, he could say his little key phrase that he says. You cannot jam out if you're in a Pokemon session. I think that's what he says. Oh, if you're a Pokemon trainer. Okay. Well, ideally, one of us can have our own headphones, jamming out or something. But ideally, I don't think they have headphones in the Pokemon world. So I don't know how that's gonna work out. But either fucking way, I guess. We're gonna just get into this battle. And ideally, we end up getting introduced, and ideally, it is me who battles first again. Now, he says, I'm Bug Catcher Doug, and welcome, as you're gonna have to step up and get through the rank ups if you're gonna go any further throughout this forest. As his Weedle is out, and of course, his Weedle shows its dominance, and his dominance is pretty shown, as he is on level 7, but ideally it will be how he deals and takes the damage and gives out the damage for his time to shine in this battle right now. Now, ideally, an interesting part, there will be more segments on our adventure throughout the forest again. Now, of course, this is just a little bit of a stretch, a decent long stretch. It looked way shorter from us walking the distance, but it's a little stretch piece of extra forest that is the maze that ideally you just go deeper through, and of course, he's guarding the second patch. Now, these are route points where they're checking, like hive points. So ideally, where the bug catchers are, including the one that is standing at the tree in the beginning that introduces us and greets us, these are all hive points. Now, that tree is surrounded and gives out the energy to the grassland that is surrounding it, that we see, that we usually go up and around in the beginning that dude looks at. So I guess one of the prime hive spots as Vaughn finally learns to locate. Now he sends out another Weedle. So I try to tell Vaughn to scratch, but immediately he gets hit with a poison sting. These Weedles are pretty quick on their attack mode of using their poison stings. Let's play the name game. as we are hiking it right now. We are hiking it up on the hill right now. Right now it's school time, so it's not as bad.
I'm crazy. I'm sipping over all the better.
Now, ideally, I tell him to do his sectional moves. That's fine. Does his best, but ends up going down. Now, before I can even send out my second Pokemon for him to get returned, this Weedle hits him with the extra poison sting. Ideally, I end up sending out Blast. And I tell him to do Ember. Super effective. Hits the Weedle. Now in this instance also, as I would like as a favor, also Bug Catcher Rick is in the background watching this battle. He did not leave or pull off yet. He went in to watch and see how his partner and friend does in the bug catching battle. Now ideally as it is, of course it is kind of stressful that he did leave his post in position with his Weedle, but ideally how it is with his Weedle in contact when he sends it out, he has his Weedle let the other Weedle know that, before we drive away, he lets his Weedle know and let the, level 5 high prime Weedles guard his post in position while he's gone. So ideally, nothing's getting past, as we've seen it when before the Weedle came at once. Ideally, they're all quick with poison sting, so of course they're gonna ideally try to attack, as he does send out Kakuna. Now, ideally, what mostly ends up happening is, ideally, what he says is it's not fair. Here he's on fire type and all that, and he's like, I hope that you haven't been treating a bug Pokemon wrong for doing that. And of course, ideally, I end up saying and letting him know, no, not completely. Blast hasn't really been using it in the forest. He's like, yes. He's like, please be careful. Now, ideally, our bug Pokemon, they end up taking the Ember. They do not dodge it because they do not want the forest to catch on fire. And it's not fair to them. So ideally, it's like practically a legal move. Now, ideally, it catches Spot's attention also. And ideally, she makes sure and she keeps it in mind. And she lets out flames and she says, you see, Blast used Ember, and the Ember is not allowed in here. We don't want to burn and harm the forest. And of course, Flame, she looks at her and understands. Ideally, of course, as it is, Kakuna is doing hardening. His Kakuna is pretty high level on priority and strong and strength. Ideally, is in the prime stage of being Kakuna. Ideally, is one of the set Kakuna in the forest for eternity that he has his Kakuna. That's like his Kakuna, like. Now, ideally, as it goes and as it is, he has him do harden. And ideally, as I figure out and I start to gain in concept with Spot and Splendor and Squeeze helping to the attention, I found out I'm losing breath. We're going up the hill, and literally both Right, we're going up a hill on a hill. I'm losing breath. But ideally, we realized that Blessed is getting stronger and more confident with using the scratch. Now, ideally as it is, and it's being proven, this Kakuna, of course, still is resilient and still tough with Harden on the physical attacks. So ideally, as it's known, this Kakuna is already taken scratch from Maz's Charmander, probably, or has been already dealing with scratch already. So ideally as it is, of course, there is time. For all I know, and for all we know, Maz, Taz, Daz, Kaz, and Daz, they can all be in there in the forest towards the end already. They, like, you know, it's so long getting through the forest. But as it is, ideally, that ends up being the only battle that happens and we get into. So that is the end of this episode for now. As we continue and we do our research along the area route in this grassy patch added also. Okay?